Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and the zodiac forecast for week commencing the 15th of July. I'm going to share with you shortly on the screen the event chart right at the start of the week. This provides a very important backdrop for the whole 7 days. There's some big energy at the start of the week and also some major developments too. But please stay with me. I will then go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon, and give you an in-depth flavour of what to expect. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. If you're new to my channel, it's lovely to have your company. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. If you're a returning visitor, as always, your views, interactions are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, as I've been sharing, 50% of people enjoy my videos but are not subscribers. Please help the channel to thrive by clicking that subscription button, but also the bell notification symbol. I'm a consulting astrologer. It's the main thing I do. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these. As they come in, I share as is. Check out how other people have found working with me. If you'd like to get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, see the subscription link below. I provide an overview of each day, the astrological dominating influence that helps us to see the big picture as well as enjoy our zodiac forecast. If you're a patron, thank you for your support. Patrons get extra information uploaded all the time. You can become a patron from $3 a month. Also, if you'd like to ascend above the zodiac forecast and understand the power of natal astrology in your life based on your unique birth data with no two reports the same. If you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, or 2 if you don't know your exact time, and I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This gives you searing insights into the patterns that have played out in your life so far, but also will help you to understand how to work with those energies more effectively future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you will also get your 12 months transits forecast. This is the moving planets in the sky interacting with your unique blueprint. And if you know your tropical astrology, why not check out my draconic option? This is your soul or karmic chart. Again, the same package. Please see the link below for more. So on the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart right at the start of the week. We have to be mindful of the 2 luminaries. First of all, the sun, which is our life force, and that's in Cancer. It's going to be in Cancer for one last week before making that transition into the sign it rules of Leo, and that will be next Monday. But the moon is in the sign of Scorpio. The moon in Scorpio can be a little bit more protective, sometimes a little bit quiet, and very much keeping one's celestial cards close to our chest. But there is a very powerful T-square between the moon and Pluto, the modern ruler of the sign of Scorpio, but also Venus, the planet of relating. Now that clash last week between Pluto and Venus was fierce, and it may have raised the stakes around a financial matter or around a relationship. So the moon in Scorpio could see anyone who really felt that, perhaps in a more challenging way, could enter into this week thinking very deeply about what to do. But there's also a very turbulent, potentially, combination between Mars, the traditional ruler of Scorpio, and Uranus, the planet of freedom. Now that started to build up towards the end of last week, but it's exact as we begin this week. And because Mars can be about desire, but also about thrust, and also about assertion, particularly our individual needs, and the host, Taurus, can be about money, values, self-worth, and Uranus can be very rebellious if there is that relationship where we're just finding it very difficult to get the balance between what we want as individuals, Venus, in terms of money or perhaps affection, even sex, and Pluto, what we want from our future or how it works in terms of the team ethic, then I think there could be some big ramifications right at the start of this week. So if there's a relationship of any kind, whether it's in the family, a friendship, a business alliance, a business partnership, or a romantic tie that's not working so well, and there is something about money, values, self-worth, those kind of strands, this can be quite a feisty start to the week. But what about the Sun in Cancer? The Sun in Cancer, of course, is very much to do with protection. And last week, in its beautiful alliance with Saturn, was really asking us to appreciate the things that are working well in our lives, even if they're more psychological. You know, the trusted friendships we have, the solid citizens that make up our life, or the progress we've made in overcoming some big challenges in our lives. But as we begin this week, you can see that the Sun is going to move into an angle with both that combination of Mars and Uranus. And because they're in the part of our situation to do with where we're most invested or what we're most attached to, and the position of the Sun is very much about home, family and protection, maybe there are some things that we need to look at to change something where the status quo isn't quite working as well. Now, from Monday through to Sunday, that link between the Sun and Uranus is really pushing us, therefore, to be a bit more open-minded, even around something that's worked well for us for a long time. So, for example, say we've had a particular way of running our home. Uranus is saying, is there some tweaks we can make? Could we declutter? Uranus loves space. The Sun in Cancer, very much about the home. Are there some old furnishings that we're hanging on to that have got sentimental value but don't really have a useful practical purpose? Then there may be a real push to free things up. But also we have got from Friday to Sunday a quite glorious link between the two planets of fortune, and that is Venus and Jupiter. Venus, the lesser benefit, Jupiter, the greater benefit. Jupiter in the buzzy, quick-moving sign of Gemini, and Venus in that proud Leo. So that's a gorgeous alliance. If you are going on a date with someone and you're really excited about it, that's one of the most splendid planetary alliances you could possibly have. But the sign of Leo is also the sign of chance or speculation, the fifth house. So if there is something, an idea that's really inspiring you, this combination could push you to just take that step forwards to really investigate this option in a big way. The only thing I would say this week is that Mercury in Leo is in a quincunx from Monday through to Thursday with Saturn. Saturn in the sign of culmination, Pisces, really asking us to engage with our emotional health, psychological issues, and Mercury in Leo can be quite proud. There may be a tender issue that we could be a bit protective about that actually may not be in our best interest, which brings us to that full moon, which occurs on Sunday. And what makes this unique, of course, is that we had a full moon just as the Sun moved into Cancer a month ago, but that one was really conflicted by the dreamy, drifting energy of Neptune. This full moon, the second in succession in Capricorn, is blessed by Neptune, but also the powerful energy of Mars, which is just on the cusp as the full moon occurs of moving into Gemini. So because the full moon is right at the end of Capricorn, so nearly in Aquarius, and Mars is nearly in Gemini, we have a lovely trine. So this can fire us up. But Capricorn full moons are essentially the classic work-life balance. If we think Capricorn is the sign of culmination in the physical world, so it's practicalities, property, work, status, money, more established and conventional parts of our existence, or the people we encounter. The Sun in Cancer is much more how we feel about things. But I feel that we had the practice of that first full moon, so this time we have an opportunity to take all the effort that we've been putting in over the last month to make sure that our home and emotional spheres are working as well as we can possibly make them work, but at the same time we're not ignoring the physical dimension, but neither being dominated by it. And because we do have such a late position of that full moon, it is almost like an early Aquarius full moon, and we have that late position of Mars. A lot of energy is going to come in terms of communication as this week draws to a close, prepping things up for when the Sun powers into Leo on Monday the 22nd of July. So it's an exciting week. There are definitely some challenges, but definitely some opportunities. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. Welcome Aries to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the Ascendant, Sun or the Moon. So Aries, as you come into this week, your ruler Mars is making a big statement because it's been moving through the part of your situation that's very much to do with resources, but also what you identify with. We of course all have our individual identity, but we have our values. How do you value yourself? That's the big question as Mars applies to Uranus exactly. This energy started to build up towards the end of last week. If, for example, you work in a situation where you don't feel as appreciated and recognised for the hard work and effort you put in, you could find yourself feeling quite fizzy about that injustice, because the sign of Uranus is very much about fairness. It's higher truths. And if something's stuck, if something or someone's not really flexing into your situation, your impatience can be absolutely tangible. But it could also see you much more outspoken, because having the Sun as we have over the last 3 weeks has really emphasized that need for security. And because you also have Saturn and Neptune in the 12th house, which has seen you very deep diving in terms of your past, your emotional needs. So it's been a time when your inner work has probably been to the fore. But that doesn't mean to say there can't be some outer opportunities this week. But I just feel that you've had a lot of time to think about what's really important to you. So for example, if you're in a close romantic relationship and you feel that you take more responsibility in terms of marshalling the domestic finances and your partner's not really on the same wavelength, this could be something that you're much more outspoken about. But you know, if you are, it's a good thing, because I feel it will get it out into the open. And also, your instinctive energies, something that I really appreciate and like about Aries people, are heightened by the fact that the point of destiny, the North Node in your sign, is forging such a fine link to Jupiter in your sector of everyday communication. So if you have a hunch about something, even if it is about money, then go with it. But you could find yourself being a bit more impetuous. So if there's something that has been capturing your imagination, you may find yourself wanting to splash out and just go for it. So that more impulsive side of you could come to the fore too. Now, I mentioned in the introduction about the clash between Pluto and Venus last week, but that clash may have created opportunities, because maybe it's intensified your understanding of some kind of connection that may not necessarily be easy to understand. It may be that someone you work with or in your friendship group really fascinates you. You may not have taken that step forwards to tell them about how you feel just yet, but that energy could be there. But conversely, if you're in a relationship where you don't necessarily feel that you get all the joy and sense of pleasure and even sense of appreciation, and you don't feel as honoured and adored as you would really like, and you don't see it as being part of your long-term future, you could decide to make a big decision this week. But whatever your status, as Venus and Jupiter get together in a beautiful dance from Friday through to Sunday, that can bring some kind of big breakthrough that could be really positive for you. Maybe it's going to be a conversation that just proves to be very upbeat. You can have a lunch with a friend and you can have good fun. go out for a night, make merry. All of those options are possible. But Sunday's full moon does tune into your ruler Mars, which is preparing to make its way into the sign of Gemini. And that transition is really, really exciting because things are going to speed up for you a lot. And where's the focus over the last 5 and this week 6 weeks? It's been very much on resources. You're going to move much more into a time when it's those interactions with others. But the full moon that occurs, it does ask us to think about whether we've got things in balance between our worldly interaction and our home structures. And so, for example, if you've got a job that's a good job, but you're not enjoying it, however well paid it is, you don't feel that comfortable with the people, maybe you've got an opportunity as Mars makes its way into Gemini to really go for something that really fits and suits you much more. It's been a great pleasure being with you, Aries. Have a great week. And if you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome Taurus to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. The week begins in sensational fashion for you with Mars, which has been coursing through your sign the last 5 weeks, applies to Uranus exactly on Monday. Uranus has been a restless energy for you full time since March 2019. Taurus people generally have a real appreciation of continuity, but you may have found that you've been pushed, even provoked at times, to break free of some parts of your existence which have given you a sense of security, but may have choked off your sense of individuality. So what Uranus has been asking you to do is really assert the most authentic version of yourself. It doesn't mean to say you weren't being true to yourself before, but just being more edgy, not necessarily just staying with those patterns that are so comforting. Now, Mars, of course, in our own sign is really emphasizing our individuality because Mars rules the ascendant, which is what the first house is very much about. So Mars over the last 5 weeks has been asking you to just be a little bit bolder, a little bit more dynamic, to not be so worried about what other people are thinking or saying. So we put these two energies together, which started to build up towards the end of last week. It's a very intense combination. Now, if you're someone who really loves to do things a bit more spontaneously over the weekend and coming into this week, the chances are you did do exactly that. You dashed off somewhere and had a thrilling time. If you're someone whose circumstances make it difficult for you to drop everything and just follow your hunches, it may have felt quite enclosing. So there may be a little bit of frustration if your circumstances don't allow that degree of freedom. But it's essentially a Freedom Central Monday start to this week. And maybe it could come down to just being very straight and direct in terms of telling someone close to you exactly what you want, particularly if they're not quite getting the message. But of course the Sun is making its way through the sign of Cancer. The host is very much about emotion and feeling, but for you that's house 3, conversation and dialogue, particularly everyday dialogue. But there's a great link between Mars and Uranus as this week goes on and the Sun. So the passion that you can be feeling at the start of this week can really be something to behold. So if there are ideas that you're inspired by and enthusiastic about, you can really convey them with a lot of conviction, that's for sure. But also that energy is going to push you to perhaps be more active, do something a bit different, and be more spontaneous. Now, as the week goes on, your ruler Venus, which is pushing you to think about your home environment, particularly if you're someone who has a real appreciation of colour and fabric and furnishings, which is often the case with Taurus people. It could, of course, be that you're a more aesthetic Taurus person, really like to get your hands in earth and go to vintage fairs and get those high quality, if older items, and rejuvenate them in some way or upcycle. All of those kind of things can really sparkle with Venus in Leo. But Venus does forge a terrific link with Jupiter. Now Jupiter starts this week in a lovely angle to the point of destiny, the North Node. If there is something that you get a feeling around, but particularly a financial opportunity, that's really an encouraging start to the week. And maybe that combination between Mars and Uranus is going to make you more daring. But the link from Friday through to the end of the week between Jupiter, the planet of fortune, and Venus, the lesser benefit, the second planet of fortune, is really great. So there could be some good news that's going to fall to you, and it could be around a property matter, a family matter, and it may be financial. Now, as the week draws to a close, we have the second consecutive full moon. For you, these go across the 9th and the 3rd axes of your chart. The 9th house, Capricorn, very much about exploration, and Pluto was really pushing you for 14 long years to be more experimental, particularly in terms of learning new knowledge. And I think after Pluto's journey, which of course is going to recommence for one last time from the 1st of September, world, 2nd September US, through to the 20th of November, you're going to get one last push to make sure that you've nailed down all the info you want. But as we go into this full moon, I feel that the conversations you had at the start of when the sun moved into Cancer, and we had the first Capricorn full moon, I think you've got a lot more clarity now. I think at that point there may have been some confusion. Now you're much clearer about what you want. But one of the things that's really dynamic about this particular full moon is that Mars is angling up to the position of the moon and then moves later on Sunday into the part of your chart which is very much to do with everyday money. But it's going to link to Pluto, the planet of power, which is right at the top of your chart and very much to do with how you interact with the world at large. So if that daring energy of Mars and Uranus pushes you to put in that application, contact that influential client, do a presentation, send in your CV, the chances are as you go into the end of this week and the start of week commencing the 22nd, there's going to be a chance to manifest some professional success. But don't be surprised if you're someone who's got a hobby or a craft or something you do from home, because that could be about to become so much more important. Have a great week, Taurus. Thanks for joining me. And if you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Gemini, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the ascendant, the sun, or the moon. As ever, we need to be mindful of your ruler, Mercury. Mercury starts this week in the fast-moving 3rd house. That really echoes into your core talent for quick communication. But we do have that combination between Mars and Uranus in house 12. If there's something going on in your situation that you feel a sense of injustice around, the chances are that your feelings and your unhappiness can, unfortunately, be very close to the surface. But you know, if you do find yourself needing to let off steam, do not judge yourself, Gemini. Uranus going through your 12th house has been really demanding, particularly since March 2019, because the 12th house is very psychological. Being an air sign, you're very much rooted in the realm of ideas. The 12th house is much more ephemeral, and it's really been pushing Gemini people to become much more conscious of some of the parts of life that you may not necessarily want to look at. We all have shadow sides, we all have our subconscious, we all have parts of our nature that perhaps we're not quite so integrating into our overall being. And that's really what Uranus has been asking you to do. Now, if you're someone who's really dived deep into personal development and healing and trying different things, you've probably served this energy fantastically well. But whoever you are and whatever you're dealing with, if someone is in some way scheming or not being very honest or upfront or a bit secretive, and do watch your back at work, particularly the 12th house can, in traditional astrology, be secret enemies. There may be something you really do need to stay very aware of what's going on around you. But I got some great news to tell you. Because although Mercury, your ruler, is in a difficult angle to Saturn through the first half of the week, which means that you just need to be aware that those responsibilities that come from work means that some of what people expect from you may not necessarily be in the areas that you shine. So their demands and pressures won't necessarily be communicated to you in a way that you like or appreciate. But as this week goes on, there is a fantastic link between Jupiter in your sign, which will bring blessings over the next year if you really apply yourself. I feel there is a little bit of a binary thing amongst YouTube astrologers. I don't watch a lot of other stuff, but I've watched a few things over time, and it's all how amazing Jupiter is, and it's all how awful Saturn is. And it's much, much more complex than that. Saturn can reward us. It can be punishing in the natal chart if it's on an awkward position, or if it moves over the south node, and so on. But if it moves over a key cusp in a natal chart, if we put the hard work and application in, Saturn often rewards us. But I feel that Jupiter is a planet that does require us to add some of that Saturnian grit. In other words, roll up our sleeves and really dive in. So whatever you're manifesting that's much more individual, as Jupiter forges a brilliant link to the point of destiny at the start of this week, that suggests the people you are connecting well to are going to really appreciate you. And that connection can get stronger as this week goes on, whether it's romantic, social, friendship-wise, or it is to do with a business interest. The link between Jupiter and Venus can be super fortunate for you as the week develops. But of course, we have that full moon on Sunday, a full moon which emphasizes the 2nd, the Sun, and the 8th, the moon in Capricorn, axis of your situation, the ins and outs of your finances potentially, but also maybe where you're most devoted and invested, where you feel really appreciated in terms of your commitment. But you know, Mars is going to move into your sign as this week draws to a close, and is angling back brilliantly to that full moon in Capricorn, but critically is in touch to Pluto. And that's the first time these two have connected across these two zodiac signs for over 220 years. So even if you start this week with some turbulence, even if you're having to watch your back, even if there are some people who do not have your best interest, you're going to take much greater control and a much firmer grip on your life direction, because not only does Mars move into your sign, it forges not just that incredible link to Pluto, it forges an amazing link to the Sun as it edges into the sign of Leo, which it rules on Monday the 22nd. So if things do feel overwhelming, choppy, frustrating, annoying right at the start of this week, I promise you, Gemini, by the end of this week, you're going to be staging a masterclass in fightbacks and demonstrating just how brilliant and effective and energized you can be by the week's end. Have a great week, Gemini. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now. Welcome, Cancer, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. The week begins with the Sun entering the last week of its journey through your sign. But it's going to be forging a very dynamic link to both Mars and Uranus, which begin this week in perfect unison. So through the week, if there's something that's really excites you in terms of a friendship group, a new dynamic direction, being a bit bolder in your approach, because you have a reputation of someone who manages things very astutely, but with an emphasis on protectiveness. And this is a week which is actually pushing you to really demonstrate to people just how dynamic you can be. And that therefore may B, linking up with people who are a bit more edgy, perhaps of a different worldview, entering into some new interests. If you play or support a sports team, that can be very exciting for you, with sudden opportunities developing. But even socially, you may find yourself right at the heart of things as this week begins, because the moon for you is in house 5, which is very affectionate at the start of the week. But of course, we do have that complex opposition between Pluto and Venus. If there is someone that you're drawn to, and drawn to in a big way, things could rattle along at such a pace, it may make you feel a little bit on edge. But sometimes, you know, if life does give us an opportunity, we do have to seize it. And if we sit on our hands and we're really taking a lot of time evaluating what we might or might not do, it can just whiz by us. So sometimes we just have to really take our courage in our hands and really go for a situation in a very dynamic way. I'll also tell you that Jupiter and Venus suggest that something that you've been working on behind the scenes, maybe discrete soundings, market research, some confidential discussions, can have a very positive outcome by the end of this week in terms of your finances. But as the week draws to a close, we do have the second of those 2 consecutive full moons. And essentially, the full moon in Capricorn is saying to you, or someone else can say to you, I'm not completely happy, Cancer, about how you're being very single-minded about what you want to do for you. But unlike the first one, which occurred as soon as the sun moved into your sign a month ago, this time you've had a lot of practice in working on what's important to you. And because of that combination between Mars and Uranus, which is so feisty but exhilarating, I think this can be a very, very exciting week. And even if some people do see things very differently to you, I don't feel that you're going to let go of something that's really making you come to life and quickening your pulse, whether it's a relationship, an interest, a business opportunity. But then it has to be said, Mars does then move as the week draws to a close into your 12th house. So over the next 6 weeks, if there are issues from your past, unresolved, deep, very deeply rooted, I believe emotions stay in our bodies. And that's why deep breathing and relaxation exercises can help us to release old wounds. But if there is something lurking around in the depths of your being, the chances are it is going to come out in the following 6 weeks. But what does happen also as the week draws to a close, the sun is linking with Mars in a very dynamic way. And it's possible that something or someone from your past is going to come back into your situation very helpfully to you. And it can have something to do with finance in a very positive way for you. Have a great week, Cancer. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome, Leo, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As the week begins, the sun, which over the last 3 weeks has been making its way through a more sheltered part of your situation, forges a right angle to the position of Chiron, the so-called wounded healer. If you feel there's a situation where your truth, Chiron in the 9th house, is not making its way through to someone who's important to you, it's almost as if they can't quite get where you're coming from, your sense of frustration can be very powerful because Mars, the planet of assertion, is right at the top of your chart in an absolute conjunction with Uranus, the planet of rebellion. That combination could, though, give you that extra push to take that next step forwards towards a more daring future, particularly professionally. So if you have been feeling a little bit below par, not quite as revved up as you would normally like to be, this combination at the start of the week can certainly give you a lot of oomph. The key is, if you're not in the job you want, or you work with people who are not very appreciative of your labour, this perhaps is the push to take that step forwards into something that is different, that is fresh. And that extra dash and daring could pay off for you handsomely, because the Sun throughout this week is linking very well to Mars and Uranus, and it may be the things you do behind the scenes, those soundings, that research, those confidential discussions that are all going to be important. But your ability to convey yourself in a very stylish and in a very persuasive way is certainly going to increase as the week draws to a close, because then Venus in your sign, the planet of fortune, links with the other planet of fortune, Jupiter, in a very benevolent way. And it may be someone that you're connected to, who does understand your gifts, who does want to help you, who does see that you have something to offer that is really quite magnificent. They can come in and be a huge support to you. Now, there is a full moon as this week draws to a close, and it is in the sign of Capricorn again. If you have been feeling a little bit lacking in vitality, perhaps some old issues from your past have been in some ways inhibiting the amount of energy you've had, that's a repetition of the full moon we had when the Sun first moved into Cancer a month ago. So this is very unusual to have two full moons in the same sign. But the difference here is that on Sunday, Mars, the planet of passion and assertion, which is in that very turbulent link with Uranus in the early part of this week, moves into the sign of Gemini, which is very much to do with communication and passion, but it forges an amazing link to Pluto in your opposite sign. So if there is something you want to articulate, by the end of this week, you're going to find your voice, and you're going to find your voice in such an incredible way, because as the week draws to a close, the Sun is going to make its way into Leo, and you really do start a new journey, revitalized by having the Sun, Venus and Mercury all in your sign, but Mars and Pluto cheering you on in a very vibrant way. It's been a pleasure being with you, Leo. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Virgo, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. This week offers a glorious opportunity to do something completely different, or perhaps to do something more spontaneously. Because you can be very dedicated, very committed, you go through the processes in a very precise way, often providing services that are of real benefit to others. But the stars have been pushing you for some time to think about your options, and this is a week where, whether it's socially or professionally, you could be drawn towards getting together with other lively people who may want to be a bit more experimental. And the big driver is Mars's conjunction with Uranus right at the start of the week. But that aspect could also see you speak your truth in a very powerful way. The ninth house is about that higher truth. And the reason for this, Virgo, is there's another influence developing this week, which is more subtle, but actually more complex. And it's a quincunx between Mercury, your ruler, in the very sheltered 12th house, and Saturn, the planet of potentially limitation in your sector of relationships. So if there's a role, an involvement, a friendship, or perhaps a romance where you really feel penned in and to the point that you can hardly breathe, you may find yourself thinking very carefully or even acting very decisively in a way which gives you a lot more control over your decision making, and perhaps that could surprise someone that's closely allied with you. Now Venus, like Mercury, is in your 12th house, but Venus actually forges a brilliant link to Jupiter, the planet of fortune. And maybe some of the opportunities that you're exploring are about your professional situation, but you may want to keep your cards quite close to your chest. So there may be a confidential discussion, you may do some research, there could be some soundings, maybe there's someone you're drawn to through your work, even romantically, but at this stage you're not quite sure how it's going to go forwards. And with the full moon, which manifests on Sunday, the second in succession in the sign of Capricorn, but this time infused by the potent power of Mars moving on the last day of this week, right to the top of your chart, I feel that If your choices are seeing you think about some kind of new direction around your professional role, it really wouldn't be a change if you did make a decisive move. But even if you don't, I can assure you over the next month, you're going to think very, very deeply whether the status quo at the present time, whether it is in a relationship, whether it is in a life role, whether it is in a way your life is structured, whether it is in a job, that status quo is definitely going to come under the astral microscope. It's been a pleasure being with you. Have a great week. And if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome Libra to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As this week begins, the sun is high in the sky still. Going into its last week, this is your sector of success, but the sun's going to be forging a very positive link to the thrust of Mars and the innovation of Uranus. Now, Mars and Uranus are in an exact conjunction as this week begins. Now, for you, this is the 8th house, which can be about shared finance. It can also be about entrepreneurship, long-term financial planning, and investments. Now, Uranus is about innovation, but Mars very much about desire. You could find that your need to push forwards with something that is a bit more edgy and daring is really strengthened, and the sun is going to be cheering those two players on. Just be aware that Mercury and your ruler Venus are in the part of your situation to do with collaboration. Venus forges a gorgeous link with Jupiter later this week, which could prove to be truly lucky for you. But Mercury is in a more tender link, and there could be one person or one organisation that however much you're trying to meet them in the middle, somehow or another, they seem to be a bit resistant to your charms. But keep the faith, because by the end of this week, we have the second successive full moon in Capricorn. Now for you, that's the 4th house, very much about how you feel about things. The sun in that part of your situation to do with your interface with the wider world. But whereas as a month ago, it all may have felt rather confusing and uncertain, as you go into this particular full moon, Mars prepares on Sunday to move into your sister air sign of Gemini. And that joins up with Jupiter in your 9th house. And there's a sense with the sun moving on the Monday following this week, on the 22nd, into Leo, that something can really start to accelerate forwards that's felt a little bit beyond reach of late. And that frustration you may feel at the start of this week with Mars and Uranus's conjunction can make way for a period of accelerated changes. Things can move at the speed of light and in such an exciting way for you as this week draws to a close. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome Scorpio to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As the week begins, your traditional ruler of Mars is in a direct conjunction with Uranus, the planet which is exalted in your sign, but in its full in Taurus. This combination can be quite fierce. If you're wanting to set a boundary on a relationship matter, this will certainly give you all the tools to do it, but someone could find you quite fierce. But perhaps it's needed if you feel that someone's been taking you for granted. They may need to be reminded of your rights in the situation. Could be a colleague, could be a family member, could be your kids, it could be a partner, because the 7th house where this occurs is where we interact with people. It's relationships, but it's also where we do need to find that balance between what we want and what other people want from us. And that is more complex with Mars. So the trick here is not to be over assertive in order to get your rights recognized. But the sun in your sister water sign of Cancer is actually linking to this duo pretty well through the whole of this week in a very dynamic way. So if there's someone that you're collaborating with where you can share or input different skills in a very complementary way, and you're working on something that you're both really inspired by. Maybe an idea to go on holiday together, maybe it's a joint business venture, maybe it's around a hobby. The collaboration and cooperation between you can really create a lot of spark, which can be exciting. Now you've also got Venus and Mercury right at the top of your chart now, which is how we connect to the wider world. But Mercury is in a discordant angle to Saturn. Saturn's in the part of your chart to do with expressing your talents. Can be about romance, the 5th house. Saturn asks us to work very hard. Mercury in the 10th house is you wanting recognition. It may feel that you're not quite getting the attention or the deserved awareness of your skills that you want, but try to stay patient, because as the week goes on, Venus, which can of course be very much to do with charm, forges a brilliant link to Jupiter, the planet of fortune. And that mixture of being clear about what you will and won't do, but also being prepared to collaborate and cooperate, but also using the extra luster that Venus in the 10th house can give you in terms of elevating your abilities is something that really can be a winning formula. Now we have a second consecutive full moon as this week draws to a close, which goes across 2 areas of your chart that's very much to do with communication. The moon's in the 3rd house, which can be where we express ourselves quickly but don't necessarily take so much time, whereas the sun's in the 9th house where you want to be a free spirit. But Mars, your traditional ruler, joins in on this event in a very constructive way. And if you have been talking about a financial matter and you are wanting to get that increase in your package or find yourself a better paid role, or if there is someone you're drawn to in a very exciting electric way with Mars combining with Uranus, by the end of this week the conversations you have could really set your pulse racing. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Scorpio. Have a great week, and if you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Sagittarius, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. You have a fantastic breadth of vision, almost panoramic, and that helps you to see that big picture. But in recent years, you've been asked to grapple with the detail of things, routines, work, structures where you need to be obligated, but also your home and emotional situation. So there's been quite a challenge to that part of you that likes to be a free spirit. Now, with Venus and also Mercury in the part of your chart that is to do with opening things up, being more exploratory, they're really priming up that part of your nature. But it could be right at the start of this week that some kind of demand or expectation that closes in upon you could make you feel quite stressed. Just being really truthful with you. Also, because as this week goes on, Mercury in your sister fire sign of Leo, very much about travel, is in a discordant angle with the planet of restriction. There may be something around your home or emotional life which proves to be a little bit limiting. But keep going this week, Sagittarius, because as the week goes on, although Mars applies to Uranus on the first day exactly, which could make you feel a bit irritable, maybe a bit reactive, especially if you don't feel particularly appreciated. But if you keep grappling with the details, but you do find some fresh ways of looking at some old issues. So, for example, if something does feel a bit stuck around the domestic sphere, maybe approaching it again can create some solutions. Also, if you are trying to work with your resources, you could be very smart this week, very astute in squeezing a bit more out of whatever you've got, whether it's savings, investments, pensions, shares, these kind of things. Or if you're an entrepreneurial type of person, creating a service which is really of help to other people, could actually really prove to be lucky, because your ruling planet Jupiter continues in your sector of relating, but forges a divine link to Venus in the back end of this week. And why that's particularly significant is that Jupiter in the 7th house can bring fortune to you over the next year around partnership or relationships or collaborations. But the link with Venus, the two planets of fortune collaborating, can be truly lucky. So it may be that however much something irritates you at the start of this week, if you can still try to find the commonalities between you and someone else, you can create something good to come from it. But equally, you could have that first date, which really could feel very, very exciting. Now, Sunday does see the second successive full moon in the sign of Capricorn. When the first one occurred a month ago, I feel it asked some searching questions about the ins and outs in terms of your budget. This one does the same, but this time you've got the solutions, because Mars, the planet of passion, links brilliantly to the moon and then moves on Sunday into your sector of relating. So if you do need to set your boundary, or if you want to be a little bit more go-getting in bringing some extra excitement into your social situation, or perhaps someone takes your fancy romantically, the following 6 weeks can be a really enriching time. But critically, on Monday the 22nd of July, the start of next week, the Sun moves into Leo, joining up with Venus and Mercury. It's your sister fire sign, so there's a commonality with your fire tropicity. But equally, the Sun forges a stunning link to Mars. So as much as there may be some gripes and irritations and frustrations and even migraines at the start of this week, the outcome can see you in a much better place, but also forging ahead, but critically through some very exciting alliances. Have a great week. Thanks for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome Capricorn to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Now, you have a reputation of being the steady Eddie of the zodiac, but is that justified? Well, I feel that you can work very hard, you're very patient, you can be very applied, you put that application in and that does create results. But also Capricorns can become great fun the older you get. So even if you ran a little on the shy or reserved side when you were younger, as you get older, you can have an opportunity to blossom. And as this week begins, there's a part of you, it's something to do with a skill, something to do with a part of your nature that's more novel, that has a magical platform to really shine and sparkle. But you have to give yourself permission to go for it, because it may require you to step over the line of where you feel really safe and content and assured, and do something that's a little bit different, perhaps even a little edgy. But if it is, perhaps sending a message to someone you're drawn to, getting in contact with someone about a talent you have, or it is trying to get a group of people together to do something a little bit more spontaneously, this week gives you loads of opportunities to shine. Not least because the position of the sun is in your sector of relating, and that's linking back very well to Mars and also Uranus. So by approaching things in a fresh but bold way, but still trying to find the ways in which you can connect to others, that's where progress can be made. There are some caveats. If you're seeking some kind of financial return, although the combination of Mars and Uranus is in your sector of chance or risk or speculation, and you may feel doing something very bold could pay off, and it could, the thing you don't want to do is to be too rash and to do something too much on impulse without applying your usual thoroughness and caution. And also Saturn, your ruler, is applying to Mercury, the planet of communication, in quite a challenging way this week. So it's not necessarily the case in the early part of the week that those developing relationships and possibilities will give you an instant return. But that can change as the week goes on, because Jupiter, the planet of luck, forges a great link to Venus in your sector of shared finances. So it is right that you should show faith, be positive, have self-confidence, push outside your comfort zone, but you may get the rewards later in the week. And then, of course, there is the second full moon in your sign in succession over the last month. But whereas the last one was blighted by the dreamy drifting energies of Neptune, and may have actually left you feeling a bit dispirited about certain connections, this one's supported by the strident energies of Mars. And Mars moves, as this week draws to a close, for 6 weeks into the most energized part of your situation. So if you want to work harder, if you want to be more industrious, you need more stamina to cope with the demands coming your way, you're going to get that energy. But equally, Mars links up with the Sun right at the end of this week as the Sun prepares to go into the sign of Leo. For you, shared finances, but also where some big transformations can go on in your life. So this week is a lot to do with prep, but it certainly gives you the opportunity to be much bolder in your approach, but also have confidence of doing things that are more unique, more innovative, a bit fresher, and that actually can really give you such a lift. And then towards the end of the week and into next week, you can really start to apply the ideas you have in that usual Capricorn, very thorough, systematic and applied way to drive yourself towards a very positive outcome. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now. Welcome Aquarius to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. Let's think back through to the 15th of May 2018, because Uranus moved into Taurus but squared up to Mars, which went on into Aquarius, into a retrograde, and the two were in conflict, if you recall, for quite a few weeks, and that was a very tense period for a lot of early born Aquarius folk. Now, ironically, all these years on, we've got Mars and Uranus coming together in an exact conjunction. That's where they unify, they're side by side, and they are the welcome to this week. Now, Mars in Taurus tends to slow Mars's impetuousness down, but it can still give us a desire to enjoy the good things in life, and this combination could see some people wanting to splash out a bit impulsively, and for you that might be around something to do with your home. So if you're wanting to do something structural, which can be Mars, I feel, in the 4th house, some kind of do-it-yourself project, this combination at the start of the week could give you a lot of thrust. But Mars can also be mightily defensive in the 4th house. Uranus can be very unpredictable. Put the two together, you've got quite a high octane mix. So if there is a situation you're dealing with in your home, family or emotional environment that's cramped, because Uranus likes space, where someone's being rather overbearing or insensitive or wanting it all on their own terms, or reminding you of everything that you should have done, blah-de-blah-de-blah, because of course Aquarius people have been taking it because of Pluto in the 12th and Uranus in the 4th, well, this time you're going to find your voice. And you're going to stand up for what you think is right for you. Ironically, on the same day, the Sun's squaring up to Chiron, the so-called wounded healer. But in the sign of Aries, for Aquarius people, that's about our thoughts, but also our voices, communication. The sign of Aries is about very much our identity. The sign of Cancer is where Aquarius people need to be more obligated to others, more conscientious and virtuous. So if there is a situation where someone's trying to load some guilt on Cancer, and that can happen in the 6th, and you feel that you're not being heard, Chiron in the 3rd, that combination between Mars and Uranus is very, very spiky. But it could mean that even if you're someone who runs on the quiet, gentle, and thoughtful side, you could be provoked to articulate something that's been burning away deep within yourself for some time. And actually, it could clear the air. And ironically, when it comes to that home environment, Uranus can be about innovation and Mars can be about industry and certainly drive. If you're wanting to work from home, or you do work from home, this combination could give you the extra incentive to make your home environment more in keeping with what you need. So you could move some furnishings around, adapt to a particular space. And because the Sun links to Mars and Uranus through this week, through your 6th and 4th houses, it would be a great opportunity to declutter, to have moved the furniture around to create a greater flow of space. If you're really into Feng Shui, this is Feng Shui central, this set of influences. But of course, Venus and Mercury recently moved into your sector of relating. But if you're trying to discuss something this week about a financial matter in the early part of the week, Mercury's in a discordant angle with Saturn, the planet of limitation. However carefully you try to frame your point of view, it may not be heard like you want. Stay cool. Later in the week, a fantastic link, one of astrology's greatest, between the two planets of fortune, Jupiter and Venus, brings the week to a close, and you could then find a huge stroke of fortune falls for you that can absolutely delight you. But also, of course, we have the second of the consecutive full moons. A 12th house full moon is one of the most challenging because it stirs up psychological stuff, but it also can bring out into the open, if not in obvious ways, people's opposition to us, sometimes hidden. Now, it was probably particularly challenging about a month ago on the first Capricorn full moon because Neptune was feeding in a drifting, dreamy mist, which meant that getting hard and fast facts proved rather elusive. But this particular full moon is supported by Mars, which has burst forwards. It's come into the very end of its journey in Taurus, which has gone on for 6 weeks, and it moves on Sunday into Gemini, and it forges a fantastic link to Pluto in your sign. But also the Sun, as this week draws to a close, is just on the anaretic point and moves into Leo on Monday. So we have the Sun and Mars collaborating brilliantly. We also have Mars and Pluto for the first time in 220 years across these two signs, urging each other on. What a motivational aspect that is. It's absolutely sensational. What about the Sun opposite Pluto as the week draws to a close? Well, that can create some issues if in a relationship you want something different from your partner, because Pluto is very much about what we want from our future, but it's also about what you need as an individual. The position of the Sun in your 7th house is how you need to connect to others. But the Sun does join up with Venus and Mercury, and I feel over the following month there can be some very exciting connections. But if there is a bit of a power battle going on in your life, whether it's at work, with a colleague, with a neighbour, with a relative, or with a lover, it could come to the boil as this week draws to a close. But that searing energy of Mars and Pluto is going to give you so much drive to get what you need from the situation. But that sparkling, delicate alliance between Venus and Jupiter can give you an uplift you may not have experienced for a very long time. Have a great week, Aquarius. Thanks for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Pisces, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July for the ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. This week begins with a really sparky alliance between Mars and Uranus. Mars is very much about thrust and desire, can be about impatience, certainly about movement, quick movement in the 3rd house, and over the last 5 weeks you may have found yourself a bit more active, maybe doing a lot more short journeys, finding your attention span a little bit lower, and it could certainly be a bit low as this week begins because the application to Uranus, where they are totally unified, is one which certainly brings a lot of electricity, which is what Uranus can be about. But Uranus can be obviously quite impatient, doesn't like to be contained. Mars, therefore, can add its thrust. So if there is a situation where you feel that you are limited in some way, like your point of view is not welcomed at work, or you feel in the immediate environment you live in that there isn't a lot of green space that you can get out and about and be a bit more active. So it can play out in lots of different ways, but it's also important to understand that the third house where it occurs is about everyday communication and about our ideas, even our belief systems. So if you've got something you feel really passionate about, Mars, perhaps even in a provocative way, Uranus, the chances are you're going to say it out loud. But what I would say to you, Pisces, if you're going on a journey at the start of this week, don't rush it. I read once that most of the accidents that occur are when people do short journeys, drive into their local shop. It's not when they're in a long journey, because I feel that what happens when I drive myself, you get into a level of concentration, which is harder to get when you're kind of buckling up as you're driving along and just getting in the groove. So if you're heading anywhere at the start of this week, don't rush, because if you do, it probably isn't for the best. And if you are going on a longer journey, why not enjoy the scenic route? Now, as the week goes on, the Sun in your sister water sign of Cancer links back to both Mars and Uranus in a really delightful way. If you are a creative and a crafter even, and you want to share your ideas or your products or find new ways of reaching people, it could be connections immediately around you, such as in your locality. A neighbour could be someone who spurs you on. You can have a real opportunity to be very, very proactive this week in an exciting way. It's just that Mercury, the planet of communication, is in house 6 now, which can be about details, and that's linking back to Saturn in your sign. Saturn's been a bit restrictive and restraining for you, particularly if you're an early born Pisces person, or particularly up to the end of the second decan, so through to degree 19 from naught. But of course Saturn's in retrograde now, and the quincunx with Mercury this week suggests that someone could pick on something that does frustrate you just when you're demonstrating this massive amount of flair and talent. Try to take it in your stride, because if there's something going on around where you live, particularly with redecoration or hosting a gathering, or you're getting some new curtains or some new furnishings, or spending time in your garden if you're in the northern hemisphere, the link between Venus and Jupiter towards the end of this week is really lovely and could bring some real serendipity to bear. But Sunday sees the second consecutive full moon in Capricorn on the trot over 4 weeks. A very rare event, but last time it was conflicted by Neptune in your sign on the enoretic degree. And for you, therefore, there may have been some confusion about some social plans, your future direction. Different people may have wanted different parts of you, but it all felt a little bit unclear. This time I think there can be a lot more clarity, but if you have been waiting to really get something to a completion point around a property purchase or a move on a rental or a lease, or you've been waiting for contractors to come in to upgrade an element of your property, as Mars moves at the end of this week in consort with this particular full moon, suddenly things can really speed up, which can be really exciting. And over the next 6 weeks, really a lot can get done very, very rapidly indeed. But as the week draws to a close, also the Sun is preparing to leave your sister water sign of Cancer and enter the practical Leo for you. But of course Leo is a sign ruled by the Sun, and the combination of Mars going into 4 and the Sun moving into 6 on Monday the 22nd means that you can actually start to take some of the creativity you've been generating recently, but boxing it into something more tangible. And that's not always easy for you, because Neptune can see you drifty, sometimes a little bit escapist. Jupiter can make you very giving and, very compassionate, the combination actually of the two rulers. But this combination between Mars and the Sun at the end of this week, along with Mercury and Venus being in your practical 6th house, is great if you want to go for a new job or reorganize your life or make it more industrious or more virtuous or more ordered or start a new health kick. Brilliant stuff as this week draws to a close. Thank you so much for joining me, Pisces. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now. Thank you so much for joining me for your weekly forecast for week commencing the 15th of July. If you've yet to check out your monthly forecast for July, please click on the link beneath this video.